He sat quietly at a table in an elite lunar restaurant, wearing a bright red MAGA cap, while the waiter eyed him as if he were a fossil dredged up from some archaic past. The crowd savored his humiliation, and eager vloggers captured every absurd second. But none of them suspected that this nobody in a cap controlled the entire lunar hospitality empire. How would he repay such insolence? It was midday by the station's clock, though day on the moon was an engineered illusion. The elite restaurant Lunar Pantheon spread beneath a sweeping dome of crystal-clear panels that revealed the endless charcoal-gray desert of the lunar surface outside. Inside, guests, draped in designer suits, shimmering gowns, and peculiar accessories, floated in partial gravity, savoring gourmet dishes that seemed to hover gracefully above their plates. Robotic waiters, their limbs smooth and silent, glided between tables, ensuring every morsel and sip arrived in perfect style. The atmosphere radiated luxury and a kind of faux cosmic serenity, as if everyone were auditioning for a role in the galaxy's classiest sci-fi flick. Into this scene stepped a man in his early 50s, white-skinned, with short chestnut brown hair and steady green eyes. He wore a sharply tailored navy suit, a pristine white shirt, and a dark red tie, the picture of composed elegance. Yet the real showstopper perched atop his head, a bright red MAGA cap, worn with unshakable pride. It stood out like a cherry on a moonrock sundae, and the subtle curve of his lips suggested he knew it. As he settled into a corner table, a ripple of curiosity passed through the clientele. A woman in a silver dress lifted one perfectly arched eyebrow. A pair of businessmen in smart suits exchanged smirks. Meanwhile, one particularly bold diner activated a holo-recording device, anticipating drama like a cat waiting at a mouse hole. A young waiter approached, olive-toned skin, short dark hair, and a smirk that tried a bit too hard to seem superior. His tone was sugary and fake, as if he'd learned politeness from a malfunctioning etiquette bot. "Pardon me, sir, but we pride ourselves on a, shall we say, progressive ambiance here. Are you sure that old-fashioned symbol on your head is appropriate for our lunar standards?" A hush trickled through the crowd, a subtle hum of whispers, a few guests fiddling with their glasses, someone stifling a giggle as they adjusted their camera angle. The tension gleamed in the air, fragile as a spun-glass sculpture in zero-G. The man in the MAGA cap met the waiter's gaze and with an easy smile, tipped the brim of his hat a fraction. "I appreciate your concern for my style," he replied, voice smooth as a polished gemstone. "But believe me, my taste has never let me down." His words rang quietly confident, like a sealed promise, or perhaps a fuse waiting for a spark. Somewhere in the back, a tourist muffled a gasp. The holo-recorder caught every angle, and the waiter's smirk faltered, if only for a heartbeat. The chapter ended on that note, a fine wire of tension stretched between host and guest, ready to snap at the slightest tug. Emboldened by a few disdainful glances from a nearby table, where a pair of fashionably dressed customers smirked, as if the whole scene were a dinner show, the waiter decided to raise the stakes. Crossing his arms over his chest, he cleared his throat with theatrical gusto and addressed the room as much as the man in the MAGA cap. "Sir," he declared, voice pitched loud enough to carry across the polished marble floor, "we cannot serve you. Your headgear simply does not meet our lunar standards. I must ask you to leave." A collective gasp swept through the diners. Two bloggers near the back corner, one in a glittery jacket and the other wearing VR glasses on their forehead, like a misplaced headband, instantly began live streaming. A trickle of comments and shocked emojis started flooding their feeds. The whole fiasco felt surreal, as if gravity had shifted and they were all teetering on the edge of some absurd, weightless controversy. The guest, however, remained infuriatingly calm. Internally, he noted the absurdity. Expulsion over a cap? Still, his face gave nothing away. Instead, he spoke quietly but firmly, each word crisp. "Interesting. So you're prepared to deny service simply because you dislike my political choice?" The waiter's eyes narrowed with smug satisfaction, his tone now dripping with false bravado. "You understand perfectly, sir. Remove that archaic symbol or leave at once." The crowd's reaction splintered. Some whispered condemnation for the waiter's blatant bias. Others snickered behind napkins at the ridiculousness of it all, and a few hovered in breathless anticipation, recording every second. The tension in the air felt like a drawn bowstring, humming with potential. The guest adjusted his dark red tie with deliberate slowness, as if savoring the silence. Then, speaking as if to himself, he mused, "Curious. I'd always believed Lunar establishments valued a diversity of views. Apparently, I was mistaken." The comment landed like a spark on dry tinder. The waiter's grin faltered for a split second, and the bloggers leaned closer, hollow cameras whirring silently. This tiny hint of pushback from the guest, so calm, so measured, promised that the show was far from over. The chapter ended on that charged note, the audience gripped by the question, what on earth, or rather, what on the moon, would happen next? When the waiter summoned security, a hush fell over the dining hall. Two burly guards, both broad-shouldered and stone-faced, made their way toward the guest's table, their boots tapping softly on the polished floor. The tension crackled like static electricity, and the crowd held its collective breath. Several guests were already streaming the showdown, their holocameras zooming in, hungry for a viral moment. The waiter, feeling like the star of his own lunar drama, shot a triumphant wink at someone in the audience, as if to say, "Watch this." But just before the guards could grab the man's arms, the guest reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small platinum ID chip. He held it up so the overhead lighting caught the engraved text perfectly. Laser-etched letters gleamed. Owner of the Moon Eats Restaurant Network. The collective gasp that followed was so loud and sudden, it seemed to bounce off the glass dome, echoing through the lunar silence outside. The waiter went from smug to ghostly pale in half a heartbeat. It was as if someone had flipped a switch and drained all the color and bravado right out of him. The guards hesitated, one raising an eyebrow in confusion, unsure whether to step back or salute. Across the room, diners exchanged stunned glances, and someone near the back let out a disbelieving snort. "Did not see that coming." The guest adjusted his MAGA cap with a gentle, almost playful touch, smiling like a teacher who'd just caught the class clown red-handed. "It appears we have a service issue," he said, voice calm and deceptively mild. "I was under the impression that my establishments prided themselves on first-class treatment without political discrimination. It looks like I'll have to perform an unannounced audit." That final line hit harder than any shouted insult. Now the watchers weren't just curious. They were riveted. The waiter's jaw hung open, and in that electric silence, the gravity of his mistake was crystal clear. The chapter ended on that piercing note, leaving everyone anxious to see how the cosmic tables had turned. The waiter's bravado evaporated like lunar ice under a solar flare. He stammered, his voice cracking. I didn't know. Please, this is a misunderstanding." But his words fell flat, each apology more worthless than the last. The crowd, already brimming with captured footage, began flooding social feeds with snarky captions and hashtags like #MoonEatsGate and #MAGA owner. The news traveled at light speed, and before long, the restaurant's higher-ups pinged the lunar comm channel, demanding an explanation. The guest rose calmly to his feet, gently brushing the guards aside with a dismissive wave. "I bear no personal grudge," he said, tone measured and unhurried. "But consequences are inevitable. Perhaps it's time to rethink your hiring practices, my dear waiter." The poor server could only swallow hard. Words lodged somewhere between his throat and his shame. A ripple of applause surged through the crowd, the clapping echoing softly beneath the glass dome. Someone shouted, "Brilliant! The true master of the house!" The guest allowed himself a small, approving grin. "I do hope in the future this establishment respects all patrons, regardless of their views," he said, adjusting his red cap with a kind of regal casualness. "And now, if you'll excuse me, I have some quality checks to perform." He turned on his heel, making for the exit, offering one last dry remark over his shoulder. "It seems lunar gastronomy could use a more interpolitically friendly approach." The door slid shut behind him with a gentle whisper, leaving the humiliated waiter stranded in the center of the dining hall like a malfunctioning hologram. Meanwhile, the audience buzzed with excitement, satisfaction, and the lingering thrill of seeing arrogance toppled so elegantly. Within an hour, the incident spread across the Lunar colony's digital networks, a shining example of how prejudice and snobbery can spin out of control, and how, sometimes, the right person in the right hat can set it all straight.